For 2 years, I thought I was welcoming my wife's brother into our home, until one night, I caught them in bed together, and everything I believed came crashing down. My name's Chris, I'm 36, and my wife, Jenna, is 34. We've been married for almost 8 years now. If you'd asked anyone who knew us, they'd probably say we were that couple, always laughing, always in sync, like we had it all figured out. We met back in college, fell for each other fast, and built a life together that I was proud of. Jenna is one of those people who can light up a room. She's smart, funny, and can charm just about anyone. She works as a graphic designer, and her creative energy is just magnetic. I admired that about her, still do, in a way. But there's another side to her that I never saw coming, a side I wish I'd never had to discover. For years, everything seemed perfect. We had the usual ups and downs, like any couple, but there was never anything that made me doubt her. Jenna was always a little private, a bit guarded, but I respected that. She had a tough childhood, grew up in foster care, moved around a lot. So when she finally introduced me to her brother, Ethan, I was happy. She'd never mentioned him much before, but I figured it was just because they'd had a rough upbringing, and maybe she didn't want to talk about it. "Chris, this is Ethan," she said one day, as she brought him over to the house. "My big brother." I remember feeling a little caught off guard. I mean, we'd been married for a few years by then, and I didn't even know she had a brother. But Jenna explained that they hadn't been in touch for a long time and had only reconnected recently. She said it was one of those things she'd wanted to tell me but didn't know how, and now that they were close again, she wanted me to meet him. Ethan became a part of our lives pretty quickly. He'd come over for dinner, helped out around the house, even stayed over sometimes if he'd had a few too many drinks. I never thought anything of it, he was Jenna's brother, after all. She'd talk about how they were separated when they were kids, how reconnecting with him had brought her some peace. I was happy for her, and I welcomed him like he was family. Looking back now, I can see how naive I was. How blind. Lately, though, things started to feel off. Jenna was more distant, more distracted. She was on her phone a lot more, always smiling at something on the screen, but when I'd ask what it was, she'd just brush it off. "Oh, Ethan sent me a funny video," she'd say, or, "just texting my brother, nothing important." She always made it sound so casual, like there was nothing strange about it at all. But I'd noticed these little things, the way she'd quickly lock her phone if I walked by, the way her face would light up when he called. Ethan had also started showing up more frequently, popping by unannounced, and sometimes just hanging around, even when Jenna wasn't home. I didn't mind at first. He was friendly, easy to talk to, and it was nice to see Jenna happy to have her brother back in her life. But there were these small moments that didn't quite add up. Like, when I'd walk into the room and find them laughing, only for the mood to shift when they realized I was there. It was subtle, but I couldn't help noticing it. At first, I told myself I was being ridiculous. Jenna had never given me a reason to doubt her, and Ethan was her brother, after all. Why would I think anything weird was going on? But the more I tried to ignore it, the harder it became. There was something off about the way they'd be so close, almost too close. Like when they'd sit on the couch together, her legs draped over his lap, or when she'd playfully swat his arm and they'd share a look that seemed a little too intimate for siblings. But I pushed those thoughts down. After all, what kind of person questions their wife's relationship with her own brother? I felt ashamed for even thinking it, so I kept it to myself. Besides, Jenna was always so sweet, so affectionate with me, there was no way she'd ever betray me. Right? Then came the night that changed everything. I had to work late, and when I got home, I saw Ethan's car parked outside. That wasn't unusual, he was over all the time. But when I walked inside, the house was unusually quiet. I called out Jenna's name, but there was no answer. Just the faint sound of voices coming from upstairs, hushed, like they were trying not to be heard. And that's when I heard it. Jenna's laugh. It was soft, almost flirtatious, and it sent a chill down my spine. I stood there for a moment, trying to convince myself that I was being paranoid, that there was nothing weird about a brother and sister sharing a laugh. But something about it felt wrong, and I needed to see for myself. So, I took a deep breath and headed up the stairs, my heart pounding harder with every step. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I knew I was about to find out. As I crept up the stairs, I felt like my heart was about to beat out of my chest. I kept telling myself that I was overreacting, that there was no reason for my mind to be going to such a dark place. But that laugh. I'd never heard Jenna laugh like that with anyone but me. It was playful, warm, almost intimate. And it was coming from behind the closed door of our bedroom. I paused outside the door, my hand hovering over the handle. Part of me wanted to turn around, walk back downstairs, and pretend I hadn't heard anything. But I couldn't. Something inside me wouldn't let it go. I had to know. So, I slowly turned the knob and pushed the door open, just a crack, enough to peek inside. I could see Jenna sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to me. Ethan was sitting on the floor in front of her, his head turned up, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. They were close, too close. I could barely make out what they were saying, but there was this easy familiarity between them, a kind of closeness that didn't make sense. "Come on, it'll be fun," Ethan said, his voice low and teasing, and Jenna laughed again, a little quieter this time. I felt my stomach twist. Something was definitely off, but I still didn't want to believe it. This was her brother, for God's sake. What could possibly be going on that I needed to worry about? I wanted to step back, but before I could move, Jenna turned slightly, and I saw her reach out and playfully ruffle his hair. The gesture was quick, but it felt wrong. Not like how a sister would touch her brother. I stood there, frozen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The logical part of my brain was screaming at me to just walk in, make my presence known, and end whatever this was. But another part of me was terrified of what I might find out, what I might have to confront. So, I pulled the door shut quietly and went back downstairs, trying to pretend that I hadn't seen anything. I sat on the couch for what felt like hours, staring blankly at the TV, my mind racing. Eventually, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs, and I quickly grabbed the remote, pretending to be engrossed in whatever show was on. Jenna walked into the living room, her hair slightly disheveled, and smiled when she saw me. "Hey, you're home late," she said, coming over to sit next to me. She leaned in for a quick kiss, and for a second, everything felt normal again. But then I caught a whiff of her perfume, mixed with something else, something faint but unmistakable, Ethan's cologne. My stomach churned, and I had to force myself not to pull away. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I had some extra work to finish up." "What have you been up to?" "Oh, just hanging out with Ethan," she said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "He stopped by to keep me company since you were working late." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Right. Well, I'm pretty beat. I think I'll head to bed." Jenna's smile faltered for a moment, like she wasn't expecting me to brush her off so quickly. "Okay, I'll be up in a bit," she said, giving my hand a quick squeeze before heading back toward the kitchen. As soon as she was out of sight, I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm that was raging inside me. I didn't know what I was feeling, anger, confusion, betrayal, but I knew I couldn't just let this go. There was something happening, something Jenna wasn't telling me, and I needed to find out what it was. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. I didn't want to be the paranoid husband, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Jenna was still her usual cheerful self, but there was a new edge to it, like she was trying a little too hard to seem normal. And Ethan, he was around more than ever. One night, after Ethan had left, I casually brought it up. "He's been over a lot lately," I said, keeping my tone light. "Doesn't he have anything better to do?" Jenna laughed, but there was something off about it. "Oh, come on, Chris. He's just lonely. You know how it is, he doesn't have a lot of friends around here. And it's nice to catch up after all these years apart." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that everything was just as simple as she made it sound. But there was this nagging feeling in the back of my mind, telling me that she was hiding something. So, I did something I'd never done before, I started looking for answers. It started small. I'd glance at her phone when she left it on the counter, just to see if there were any messages from Ethan. There were, but they were innocent enough, inside jokes, silly memes, nothing that would raise any red flags on its own. But then I noticed that she was getting a lot more notifications from him, late at night, when I was already in bed. I'd hear her phone buzz on the nightstand, and she'd quickly swipe it away, like she didn't want me to see. I tried not to let it bother me. After all, what kind of guy gets jealous of his wife texting her brother? But the more I noticed, the harder it was to ignore. There was this tension building between us, this unspoken thing that neither of us was willing to address, and it was slowly driving me insane. And then, one night, I found it. The piece of evidence that changed everything. I was about to head to bed when I realized I'd left my laptop charger in the living room. I went downstairs to grab it, and as I walked past Jenna's purse, I noticed her phone sticking out of the top, the screen lit up with a new message. I don't know what made me do it, but I picked up the phone and glanced at the screen. It was a message from Ethan. "Miss you already. Can't wait for the next time." My heart dropped. I stood there, staring at the message, trying to convince myself that I was reading it wrong, that there was some innocent explanation. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't how a brother talked to his sister. This was something else. Something I hadn't been ready to see. A couple of days after I saw that message on Jenna's phone, I decided to leave work early. I'd been distracted all morning, my mind still tangled up in a mix of doubt and suspicion. I thought maybe coming home and clearing my head would help. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Ethan's car parked out front, and that same uneasy feeling washed over me again. But I told myself to calm down. Maybe he just came by to hang out, like he often did. I stepped inside, trying to act normal, and heard their voices drifting from the kitchen. They were laughing about something, and for a moment, I almost felt relieved. Maybe everything really was okay, and I was just being paranoid. But as I rounded the corner and walked into the kitchen, they both stopped mid-laugh and turned to look at me, their expressions quickly shifting to surprise. "Oh, hey, Chris," Jenna said, her voice a little too bright. "What are you doing home so early?" I could feel their eyes on me, and it made me uncomfortable. "I wasn't feeling well," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "Decided to take the rest of the day off." Jenna and Ethan exchanged a quick glance, so fast I almost missed it. "Oh, I'm sorry, babe," she said, coming over to me and placing a hand on my arm. "Why don't you go lie down? I'll bring you some tea." I nodded, feeling like my head was swimming. "Yeah, that sounds good," I muttered, forcing a small smile. "I think I just need to rest for a bit." I made my way up the stairs, my heart heavy, and lay down on the bed. I could hear faint murmurs from the kitchen, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid, that there was no reason to think anything was wrong. But the way they had looked at each other when I walked in, it was like they were sharing a secret. A few minutes later, Jenna came into the room, carrying a cup of tea. "Here you go," she said, her voice soft and gentle, as if she were trying to take care of me. "This will help you relax." I took the cup from her, and she sat on the edge of the bed, watching me for a moment. "You sure you're okay?" she asked, and I could see a hint of concern in her eyes. "You look really tired." "I'm fine," I lied, taking a sip of the tea. "Just need to rest." She smiled, leaned down, and kissed me on the forehead. "Okay, get some sleep. I'll check on you in a little bit." As she left the room, I closed my eyes, trying to push away the thoughts that were swirling around in my head. I didn't want to think about Ethan, or the message I'd seen on her phone, or the weird, tense feeling I'd gotten when I saw them together. I just wanted to sleep, to escape from all of it, even if it was only for a little while. The tea was warm, and the bed was soft, and before I knew it, I was dozing off. My mind drifted in and out, flashes of the day blending with hazy dreams. At one point, I thought I heard Jenna's voice, softly murmuring, and then Ethan's, but I was too far gone to make sense of any of it. I felt like I was floating, slipping away into a place where none of this mattered anymore. But even as I dozed off, there was this nagging feeling, this tiny voice in the back of my mind telling me that something was very, very wrong. I just didn't know what it was yet. I woke up groggy, with the taste of Jenna's tea still faintly on my lips. The room was quiet, and for a moment, I thought maybe I'd slept through the rest of the day. I listened, but there were no voices, no sounds of laughter drifting up from downstairs. I assumed Ethan must have left while I was dozing. I got up, stretched, and decided to head down to the kitchen to grab some water. My head felt heavy, like I was still half asleep, but I tried to shake it off. I made my way down the stairs, poured myself a glass, and drank it slowly, letting the cool water clear my mind. For a moment, I started to think maybe everything was fine, that I'd just been overthinking things, letting my imagination run wild. But as I headed back upstairs, something caught my eye, a faint, dim light glowing from underneath the door of the guest room. I thought maybe Jenna had left a lamp on by accident, but something about it made my stomach churn. I took a few steps closer, my heart starting to race. When I got near the door, I froze. There it was again, a sound. A soft, quiet groan, barely audible but unmistakable. I felt my hands shaking as I reached for the doorknob. My brain was screaming at me to stop, to walk away, but my body had a mind of its own. Without thinking, I turned the knob and pushed the door open, and what I saw next was like something out of a nightmare. There they were, Jenna and Ethan, tangled together under the blanket, moving, oblivious to the fact that I was standing right there, watching. For a second, I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the air had been sucked out of the room. My vision blurred, and I almost convinced myself that this wasn't real, that I was still dreaming. But then I saw Jenna's hand, gripping his back, and the way their bodies moved, and I knew. I knew this was as real as it could get. Without thinking, I grabbed the edge of the blanket and ripped it off, exposing them both. The shock on their faces was instant, and Jenna quickly scrambled to cover herself, but it was too late. I'd already seen everything. What the hell? I shouted, my voice breaking with a mix of rage and disbelief. Brother and sister. Are you kidding me? I couldn't even process what was happening. It was like my brain was short-circuiting, trying to make sense of this impossible situation. Ethan rolled off the bed, trying to grab his clothes, his face pale and panicked. Chris, man, Get out! I roared, cutting him off. Just, get out of my house. He grabbed his pants, barely managing to pull them on, and bolted past me, disappearing down the stairs. I could hear the front door slam shut, and then everything went silent, except for the sound of my own ragged breathing. I turned back to Jenna, who was still sitting on the bed, clutching the sheets around her, her eyes wide and scared. Jenna, I said, my voice quieter but no less intense. Did you bring Ethan into our lives 2 years ago just so you could sleep with him? Who the hell is he? She lowered her eyes, unable to meet my gaze, and for a long moment, she didn't say anything. I could see her shoulders trembling, but I didn't care. I needed answers. I needed to know how long I'd been made a fool. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. He's my ex-boyfriend, she said, each word like a punch to the gut. We dated before I met you, and then we reconnected. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. Ex-boyfriend. I repeated, the words barely making it past my lips. You told me he was your brother, Jenna. You've been lying to me this whole time, making me believe, all this time, you've been sleeping with him, right under my nose." She didn't answer, just stared down at the bed, her hands still gripping the sheets tightly, as if they could protect her from the truth she'd been hiding. I could see the tears starting to well up in her eyes, but it only made me angrier. "How long?" I demanded, my voice louder than before. "How long have you been doing this?" "Since he came back," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm so sorry, Chris, Sorry." I snapped, cutting her off. "You're sorry. You lied to me for 2 years, brought him into our home, let me believe he was family, and you think that a sorry is going to fix this?" She started to cry, but I couldn't find it in myself to feel any sympathy. I was done. "Pack your things," I said, my voice flat, emotionless. "Why are you still sitting there? You lied to me, cheated on me, and you think this is normal? Pack your things, and get out." For a moment, she didn't move, like she thought I might change my mind. But when she saw the look in my eyes, she knew there was no going back. Slowly, she got up and started gathering her clothes, her hands shaking, tears silently streaming down her cheeks. I stood there, watching her, feeling like a part of me was dying with every second that passed. But I didn't stop her. I didn't offer to help. I just watched, silently, as the life we built together came crashing down around us. And as she packed, all I could think about was how everything I thought I knew had been a lie. When Jenna left that night, dragging her suitcase down the stairs with tears streaming down her face, I thought I'd finally be able to breathe. But the moment the door closed behind her, all I felt was emptiness. It wasn't enough. She had lied to me, betrayed me, and I had let her walk away with nothing but a suitcase and a few tears. It didn't even come close to matching the pain she'd put me through for 2 years. That's when I realized I needed more than just distance. I needed to make sure she understood what it felt like to be blindsided, humiliated, and utterly devastated. I didn't want to just move on, I wanted her to feel the same pain, the same betrayal, the same sense of loss that I was drowning in. So, I started planning. The first step was simple. I knew Jenna's life, her routines, and her habits. I knew she was obsessed with appearances, always needing to look perfect, to have everything seem perfect. She had this polished image, especially at work, where everyone thought she was this brilliant, kind, put-together woman. That was going to be the first thing I tore apart. I spent the next few days gathering everything I could, old photos, messages, anything that hinted at the double life she'd been leading. I didn't need to hack into her accounts, she'd been careless enough to leave traces of her deceit all over our shared devices. I found more messages between her and Ethan, dates going back to the very beginning of when he showed up in our lives, showing they'd been meeting up, lying to me, and laughing behind my back. I made copies of everything and prepared a neat little package, addressed to Jenna's boss. I knew she had been angling for a promotion, trying to prove that she was reliable and professional. What would her boss think if he knew the truth? If he saw the messages about how she'd been sneaking around during lunch breaks, using her meetings as an excuse to spend time with her ex-boyfriend? It wasn't just about getting her in trouble at work, it was about shattering that perfect image she'd been so obsessed with maintaining. I wasn't going to let her slip back into her normal life, pretending like she hadn't done anything wrong. But that was just the beginning. The real blow was yet to come. I started contacting friends, our mutual friends, people who'd known us as a couple, the ones she'd spent time with. I arranged a small gathering at our place, pretending like I just wanted to have some company to get through this rough patch. People came over, a mix of friends from different parts of our lives, and I played the part of the wounded but composed husband, thanking them for their support. Once everyone was settled, I made sure the conversation drifted toward relationships, trust, and loyalty. Then, when the time was right, I made my move. "I want to tell you all something," I said, my voice calm but cold, as I stood in the middle of the living room. "There's a reason Jenna and I aren't together anymore, and I think you all deserve to know the truth." The room fell silent, all eyes on me. Some people looked confused, others concerned, but no one said a word. I pulled out my phone, and with a few swipes, I brought up the messages between Jenna and Ethan. I started reading them out loud, making sure to include the little details that would make it clear just how long this had been going on, and how calculated it all was. I trusted her, I said, my voice louder now, fueled by the anger I'd been holding in for days. And this is what she was doing behind my back. She brought him into our home, pretended he was her brother, and lied to all of us. Every single one of us. The reactions were immediate. Gasps, whispers, and shocked faces all around the room. Some of our friends tried to interject, to say that maybe this wasn't the right time or place, but I ignored them. I wasn't done yet. And it's not just me she's lied to, I continued, locking eyes with a few of the friends who had always been closer to Jenna. She's been lying to you, too. Making you believe this whole story, while she's been sneaking around, laughing behind our backs. I could see the impact my words were having, the way people's faces shifted as they realized the extent of the betrayal. I'd managed to plant seeds of doubt, to make sure that even if Jenna tried to tell her side of the story later, there would always be this lingering question in their minds: what else had she lied about? What other secrets was she hiding? And that wasn't the end of it. I'd made sure to take photos of the messages I'd read, and before the night was over, I posted them online, tagging her and Ethan. I wrote a simple caption: the truth always comes out. Here's what my wife's been doing behind my back for the last 2 years. I knew it would spread, that people would see it and share it, and that Jenna would never be able to control the narrative. I was tired of being the one who was kept in the dark, the one who was made to look like a fool. It was my turn to expose the lies, to make sure that Jenna and Ethan couldn't just walk away from this unscathed. I wanted them to feel the same sense of helplessness, the same shame and embarrassment, that I had felt when I walked into that room and saw them together. I knew some people would think I was being harsh, that I was overreacting, but I didn't care. For 2 years, I had been lied to, deceived, made to live in a twisted version of reality where I was the only one who didn't know the truth. I had loved Jenna, and she had thrown that love away like it was nothing. So I decided to do the same to her, to throw away the illusion she'd created, and leave her with nothing but the wreckage of her lies. I didn't know if it would make me feel better in the end, but in that moment, I felt powerful. I was no longer the victim, the clueless husband who had been played for a fool. I had taken control, and I wasn't going to let her forget what she'd done, not now, not ever. After everything I'd done, I thought Jenna would have disappeared, gone into hiding somewhere to avoid the fallout. But a few days passed, and she stayed surprisingly quiet. No frantic calls, no angry texts, no attempts to defend herself. She just vanished. I didn't know if she was still with Ethan, or if she had managed to find some place to stay, but I didn't care. I felt like I'd finally won, like I'd taken back some of the power she'd stolen from me. But as the days went by, the satisfaction I'd felt started to fade. The anger was still there, sure, but beneath it was this gnawing need for answers. I had all the proof I needed of what she'd done, but I still didn't understand why. Why go through all of this trouble, all of these lies, when she could have just left? Why bring Ethan back into her life, and mine, under the guise of being her brother? I knew I shouldn't have cared, that I should have just signed the divorce papers and moved on, but I couldn't help myself. I needed to hear it from her, needed to understand what had been going through her mind for the last 2 years. So, I picked up my phone and called her. She answered after a few rings, and there was a pause, like she wasn't sure if she should speak. "Chris," she finally said, her voice soft, tired. "I didn't think I'd hear from you again." "Why did you do it, Jenna?" I asked, skipping over the small talk. I wasn't interested in playing games anymore. Why lie to me for so long? Why bring Ethan into our lives and pretend he was your brother? Why not just leave if you wanted to be with him? There was silence on the other end, and for a moment I thought she might hang up. But then she sighed, a long, shaky breath that made it clear she'd been waiting for this question. I was scared, she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. Scared of losing everything. What the hell does that even mean? I snapped, my patience wearing thin. You were already cheating on me. You did lose everything. I didn't want to leave you, she said, and I could hear the tremble in her voice, like she was holding back tears. I know how messed up that sounds, but I didn't want to lose what we had. I didn't want to throw away our life together, our home. You've always been safe, Chris. Stable. I could count on you. I was stunned. I had no idea how to respond to that. Safe. I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. So you just used me. You kept me around while you were sleeping with him because I was convenient. It wasn't like that, she said, and now I could hear the desperation creeping into her voice. I know I hurt you, and I hate myself for it, but I was scared to be on my own. Ethan, he's unpredictable. He's exciting, sure, but I knew that if I left you for him, I'd be throwing away everything that was stable in my life. I didn't want to lose that. I didn't want to lose you. I felt like I was going to be sick. So what? You thought you could have it both ways? I asked, my voice shaking with disbelief. Keep me as your loyal husband, and have Ethan on the side for excitement. Jenna didn't answer right away. I could hear her breathing, and I imagined her trying to find the right words to explain something that was completely inexcusable. I thought I could manage it, she said finally. I thought if I was careful, if I kept everything separate, then maybe no one would get hurt. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that came out before I could stop it. Well, you failed, Jenna. You hurt everyone. Me, Ethan, our friends, everyone. All because you were too scared to make a choice. She didn't argue. I know, she said softly. And I'm so sorry, Chris. I really am. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how to stop. I was selfish, and I kept thinking I could make it work, that I could keep everything balanced. But it got out of control, and I lost everything. I was quiet for a moment, trying to process what she was saying. None of it made sense to me. It was like hearing someone confess to a crime and then say they didn't mean for it to happen. Then why didn't you leave me when he came back? I asked, my voice hollow. Why not just end it if you knew you wanted to be with him? I heard her swallow, and then she said something that shook me to my core. Because he didn't want me to leave you, she said, her voice barely audible. Ethan, he liked the game. He liked sneaking around, hiding it, knowing that he was getting away with something. He told me that leaving you would make everything less fun. I felt my blood run cold. Ethan had been using me, using our marriage, as part of some twisted game, and Jenna had played along because she was too scared to lose the safety I provided. I didn't know whether to scream or cry or laugh at how absurd it all was. You lied to me, I said, my voice quiet but filled with a rage I could barely contain. You let him come into our house, our lives, and you pretended he was your brother because it was more fun for him. I'm sorry, she said, and now she was crying, her voice breaking. I know that doesn't mean anything to you now, but I am. I hate what I did. I hate that I lost you. Stop, I said, cutting her off. I don't care if you're sorry. I don't care if you hate yourself. The only thing I care about now is that you pack up your things, sign the divorce papers, and leave me out of whatever mess you and Ethan have made. You two deserve each other. There was silence on the line, and then she said, I'll sign them. I'll pack my things. I won't fight you. Good, I said, and I hung up without another word. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, trying to make sense of everything she'd said. I felt like I'd been living in a house of mirrors, surrounded by reflections of a life that never existed. Everything had been a lie, and now that I finally knew the truth, I felt empty. I thought getting revenge would make me feel better, but all I felt was the crushing weight of betrayal. I thought I was safe. I thought I was stable. But all I had been was a piece in their game, and I wasn't sure I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. The divorce went through quicker than I expected. Maybe it was because Jenna didn't put up a fight, or maybe it was because I was so determined to put it all behind me. Either way, the day I signed the final papers, I felt like I could finally breathe again. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of relief, a lightness I hadn't realized I was missing. It was like a weight had been lifted off my chest, and I could see clearly for the first time in a long time. I thought the divorce would be painful, that I'd feel grief or regret, but all I felt was freedom. The lies, the deceit, the constant gnawing at the back of my mind, gone. I no longer had to question every word, every glance, every text on her phone. I was done playing a part in their sick little game. I was free, and it was exhilarating. After the divorce was finalized, I moved out of the house we had shared and got a new place on the other side of town. It was smaller, quieter, and perfect for a fresh start. I threw myself into my work, reconnected with friends, and started doing things I'd been neglecting for years, hobbies, little trips, even just spending an afternoon reading at a cafe. It felt like I was slowly rediscovering who I was, without Jenna's shadow hanging over me. As for Jenna, things didn't go quite as smoothly. Word spread quickly about what had happened. Maybe it was because of that one night when I revealed everything to our friends, or maybe people just started putting the pieces together on their own. Whatever the case, gossip started swirling, and suddenly, everyone knew the truth. Jenna, the woman who had always cared so much about appearances, was now the subject of whispers and side glances everywhere she went. It didn't help that Ethan had bailed on her. Once everything was out in the open, he disappeared, no dramatic goodbye, no explanation. He just stopped answering her calls and texts, left her with nothing but silence. I found out later that he'd moved to another city, probably looking for his next thrill. She had been nothing more than a toy to him, something to play with until he got bored. And once he'd had his fun, he was done. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a small sense of satisfaction knowing that she was dealing with the consequences of her choices. For so long, she'd been living this double life, manipulating me, lying to everyone around her, and now it was all catching up to her. The people who once admired her, who thought she was perfect, were now avoiding her, talking about her behind her back. She had become a scandal, a cautionary tale. She sank deeper, losing friends, losing the respect she'd worked so hard to maintain. The last I heard, she had left her job and was living somewhere out of town, trying to escape the whispers that followed her. It was strange, knowing how far she'd fallen, but I didn't dwell on it. I'd already wasted enough of my life on her lies. I'm not going to pretend like everything is perfect now, but it's better. I'm better. I don't wake up every morning with that sick feeling in my stomach, wondering what Jenna is hiding from me. I don't spend my days trying to make sense of a reality that never existed. I just live. And it's more than enough. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that you can't build a life on lies. They'll eventually catch up to you, no matter how well you think you've hidden them. Jenna thought she could have it all, that she could juggle her safe, stable marriage with her secret thrill, but in the end, she lost everything. And Ethan? He showed his true colors, running off the moment things got difficult, leaving her to pick up the pieces alone. I don't know where life will take me next, but I'm looking forward to finding out. I've learned to value honesty, to listen to my gut, and to never ignore those little red flags. I'm not the same person I was before all of this, and that's okay. I'm stronger now, and I know what I deserve. So yeah, that's the end of it. The divorce is done, the lies are over, and I'm finally moving on. If anyone out there is dealing with something similar, just know this: you don't have to stay trapped in someone else's mess. You can get out, and when you do, you'll realize just how good it feels to breathe again.